I think we have had a very interesting session, extremely well planned, for which I have to take no credit, I have to say. But I think it worked out very well in terms of the flow of the presentations, with Andy introducing us some of the challenges when we are looking at these homes of the future in terms of the energy or the heat storage in this particular case. Jeremy with his presentation on the solar energy development, follow up with Harry in terms of what's going on in research and development here in PV in Heriot-Watt. Then we move forward to Sue with issues related to the design, social factors, and the choices that we made every day in terms of choosing our energy and how we consume and use it or misuse it in some cases. And finally, with Phil's presentation, rounding it up with a very interesting 3 key questions around homes feed for zero. I would like then to open it to the floor, and please ask for any sort of questions, comments to any of our speakers. So if you have any question that could be maybe related to the whole session, that's also welcome as well. We have a question here in the front.
Ross Buchan, Chartered Surveyor with Thomson Bethune, but also a long association with Heriot-Watt in the School of the Built Environment. I've been involved with Phil on the TAR-based programme in past years, and what became very apparent was that we needed an incentivisation for this to go forward. We're faced with a massive challenge to get carbon usage down, and I think that one of the major blockages is, as Jeremy stated, the political intervention. And I wonder how we manage to take things forward, if at all possible, cutting through that political intervention that we have currently.
Is your question addressed to Phil in particular?
That question's it's being generalised. Actually, it's come out from the discussion from all of the speakers. Okay. So everybody, please.
Okay, thanks. So, any of our speakers want to take a first go?
Well, it's just we live in a democracy, and all we can do is speak truth to power as we see it in our own circles of influence. And my experience is, if you do that using the language of confrontation and not conflict, then you can make progress. And I'll give one example of that from the types of things I was talking about. When the government cut the feed-in tariff, the big ambush cut, the second cut, that was, I forget exactly how many percent it was, but it was in December of 2011, and we had 6 weeks notice. And it's 6 weeks, solar modules are 6 weeks on the water from China. So this was a measure that was designed to maim an industry. And I was told this by multiple people inside. Chris Huhn at Paragon and Virtue had struck a deal with Osborne, and he didn't favour solar PV. So that was part of the deal. He would throw solar PV, the whole solar PV industry, to the wolves in order to get 2 ROCs for offshore wind. And of course, we confronted them on that. We took them to the Court of Appeal, arguing that they'd behaved outside of their legal jurisdiction, that according to the law that they themselves had drafted. And we won there, and they took us to the appeal court, and we won in the appeal court. And for those who don't know the full story, they then took us to the Supreme Court, where we were there with the Serious Fraud organisation and others. And the Supreme Court wouldn't even hear the case. So you might think that would be the broken end of a relationship, but it wasn't. And we just kept talking calmly and in a confrontational way, and not a conflict way, and relations now are pretty good. And of course the government's changed around, because in the interim, the nuclear dream, the Renaissance dream, has started evaporating on them. And the evidence from Germany kept coming in that, this stuff does actually work. It's going to be huge, and UK PLC would. And so they do change. Things can change. But what you mustn't do is, start using the language of conflict or worse.
Could I say that we've always seen working with the right partners as being crucial. we had hoped that working with city-level authorities would be more effective because they're powerful units, and yet they go to the vote every 2 or 3 years. So that's and they have to look at their voters, eyeball them in the streets every day. So I'm wondering, Jeremy, if do you think that that's been effective as it could have been, working with, in Germany, of course, you work with regional utilities and local urban utilities. Here, we're faced with the big six. So unfortunately, we can't turn to them for real support to get citizen solar power up.
Yeah, but I mean, let's not forget 2 of the big 6 are German, right? So the experience there is fantastic because after Fukushima, Merkel, forgive me if you all know this, but what happened to Germany was that there was then an election in the very conservative state of Baden-Württemberg, where, of course, the nuclear phase-out was the big issue. And Merkel knew at that point she would not be re-elected unless she went anti-nuclear, and that was it. So it was people and communities who did that. And what was the response of industry? The Association of German Utilities met the next week, and there are more than 1,000 water and energy utilities in this big body that had hitherto been a massive mouthpiece for the nuclear industry, and they voted to get rid of nuclear. And E.ON and RWE didn't, the 2 who are in the big 6, didn't vote with that. They voted against it, but they were outnumbered. And of course, you all know what happened subsequently. RWE and E.ON have had to pull out of nuclear as well, leaving only EDF, which is essentially a ministry of the French state, and a bankrupt one at that.
Thank you. I think we're just going to move on then. Probably something more we could add to that, but let's just go back to the floor. And any other comments, questions, please? Yes, there is one on the back there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm a student here at Heriot-Watt, and I have a question for Mr. Leggett. In your presentation, you mentioned that a target for generation from PV technologies by 2020, if I'm not mistaken, is 1,600 gigawatts of electricity, and taking into account the existing efficiency of these technologies, what are predicted effects, if any, for agriculture and forestry sectors in terms of surface area needed for this target?
Well, I mean, I can't rehearse those figures off the top of my head, but qualitatively, much is made by the incumbency of how much of an area of Britain you'd have to cover in solar panels to, light 2 or 3 light bulbs. So that's the argument I suspect you're getting at. There are 2 things to say about that. I mean, the British industry has used land registry statistics to work out what it would take to totally electric power the United Kingdom with solar, and it's about 3 to 4% of the land area. It can all be done on roofs and facades of buildings, all of it. No agricultural land at all. Now, of course, that would be a fundamentally stupid thing to do, and we're not advocating it. It's just a calculation. Do you know what I mean? To show the power. So please be aware of that work. And then the other thing is, with ground mount solar, one of the installations I opened a couple of months ago in the West Country shares the land with agriculture. So there are flocks of sheep. They've got somewhere to shelter if the weather's bad. So don't. My appeal would be don't swallow that argument, because it's just another one of those things that the incumbency uses to do us down unfairly.
Thank you. We have one other question here on the front. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Maya Kodman. I'm a former student. I graduated in architectural engineering from Heriot-Watt University. I have a question for Andy Ford. You talked about in your talk about thermal storage, interseasonal thermal storage from the summer and being used in the winter. But what about in places such in the Middle East, such as Dubai, with buildings like the Burj Al Khalifa that have huge thermal gains, I mean, it's basically an 800-meter high glass box in the middle of the desert. It has a massive cooling load. So what do you do with the heat when, you know, you can't possibly utilize all that heat? I mean, what kind of thing would you suggest for a building like that, especially with the new building that's about to go up in Saudi Arabia, the 1 kilometer high building?
What do you do with a lot of heat when you simply don't need it, is the sort of question.
Well, I mean, would it be feasible to utilize that energy?
I think Saudi Arabia is a different place to Dubai. I think it's very much to do what the climate is actually there, and in Dubai it's quite wet and damp, so it stays hot all the time. The fluctuations are much less, but you get into inland and you start to get large fluctuations in temperature, and actually it's much easier to get rid of heat. What you're basically trying to do is find a time to dispose of heat, and you'll be using storage simply to offset it until it's convenient to do so, and that may simply be a day-night cycle rather than a seasonal cycle, and I think it's more likely to be that in places like Saudi Arabia. I mean, interestingly, Thermodec we have done, which is a ventilated slab storage, fabric thermal storage system, is actually used quite a lot in the Middle East, and it's used to offset peaks because there's fluctuations day-night, and it means that they don't have the issue of power cuts being a problem because the heat is embedded in the building, or rather, in fact, the cooling effectively is embedded in the building. And so if you turn it off, it's not a big deal. It just stays cool for a while. And in terms of storage, I think it's quite interesting when you think of what the built environment actually is, and how you would actually deal with a completely sort of PV-powered world. You don't have to store it necessarily as electricity. It can be stored in the fabric as whatever you're trying to do to the building, either warm it up or cool it down. As much as electricity at the beginning, it could be stored as your end aim. And I think these two things need to be taken together. Yeah.
Any other member of the panel want to add something? No? Okay. So going back to the floor then, I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. Or maybe we all are thinking about the next cup of coffee. No. Okay, yes, sorry, thank you, great. There's just one last question there. If you just come bring the mic to the front, sorry.
Just a general question, really, to the whole panel. There's obviously a lot of students here today, and I'm lucky enough to have Professor Roaf as my supervisor, and she always says start with a dream. What would you suggest to students moving forward, or young entrepreneurs, for the next big thing? Or where do you think we should focus our time moving forward?
Sorry, could you just give us your name and
My name's Sam Chapman. I'm from Heriot-Watt University.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a dream, I would think the solar cities, actually. I mean, why mess around with anything in between? Why not just go for a pure solar city? And I think possibly my most exciting thing currently is actually solar-powered bicycles. I mean, I know it sounds odd, but the thing that I think is taken off, for instance, across Austria, has been pedelecs. And I see lots of people cycling. If you look to London now and compare it to 5 years previously, there are so many people cycling, and I see that as the most positive sign I've seen in terms of a change in attitude to everything, actually. It's a fundamental shift in the way you think. You no longer decide you want to have a car, you decide you want to have a bike, and I suspect the pedelecs effectively means that even people of my age can cycle very effectively and get everywhere they want. So transport, electric transport.
I think maybe in the interest of time, maybe I would like to pass it over to Phil and Harry if they want to add something.
I think I will just add on to this point. You know, we need to have the upfront cost reduced. And as in terms of the PV, if you look at the module cost have gone down considerably, yeah? as compared to the balance of system, which comprises of basically installation, then you've got storage elements, and also inverter cost. So all these have to be reduced. If you look at the trend, it has not gone the same way as the module cost has gone down in 20 years' time. So there's a big, I think, R&D focus which is required to actually address the issues together. And so there are equal opportunities in storage area to really bring down the cost of the total system's cost down. And you see, this is one of the blockers that in some of the poorer nations, if you ask the choices, obviously, whether they want to go buy a lantern or buy something kind of, easily accessible thing, they will not prefer to have solar. Because if the cost is going to be something like £10,000 for the total cost of the system, the upfront cost has to be really brought down considerably. So these are the challenges we are meeting, but along with that, there are opportunities coming. And so for young mass, I think this is quite an open situation where opportunities are too many, I would say.
Phil, please.
Okay, so this is, advice to a young man or a young woman, yes? My advice to a young man or woman would be a technology, perhaps a specialist, know the depths of the technology that you're interested in, but study enough human relations to be able to see the implications of what you're doing and roll those implications out into society. The solutions for society have to be technologically soundly based. So you have to have that engineering and scientific or technological underpinning, but don't just stop there. Follow it through into applications into society, because I'll say it again, I said it before, it's the people that what they do that uses the energy that we supply, whether it's coming from millions of square meters of solar power, or whether it's coming from underground, or wherever it's coming from. You need to get alongside the user and to understand their needs and hopefully modify their behaviour, work with them to satisfy their aspirations, as well as understanding deeply and implicitly how your technologies work.
Please join me to thank the speakers again. Thank you.